Good afternoon, friends, family, loved ones, enemies, contributors, distractors. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. And this week's show is called Unapologetic. And I'd like to thank Teresa for showing up and Keisha for showing up. Welcome back to the Blueprint. And what does it mean to be unapologetic? And what I'm actually going to be talking about is being us as a Black community, and us in the Black community being unapologetically Black. And what does that mean? I thank Vincent for showing up and Marshall. Welcome back, cuz. What does it mean to be unapologetic and unapologetically Black? So this is what we're going to talk about. So when we talk about the prefix un, that means not. So unapologetic means you're not apologizing. There's no apologies. And if we look at the definition of apology, like the Webster definition of apology, it means a regretful acknowledgement of an offense or failure, an act of expressing remorse that you caused. And that's that's the important thing, because when we're talking about an apology or we're talking about being sorry for something, those are actually, they're close, but they're two different things. So we're going to cover both of those things. But a regretful acknowledgement of an offense or a failure, and an act of expressing remorse. And what does apology come from? Because I know we all know what apologies or apologizing means. But when we talk about being apologetic, and I like to get into the etymology of the word, and what apology come from, it's a Greek word that means apologia. And what is apologia? Apologia is a formal written defense of one's opinions or conduct. It's a formal written defense of one's conduct or one's opinions. And if you look at Plato's Apology and Plato, that's something that was covered a lot in our universities. And what Plato's Apology and Plato is about Socrates' trial. Socrates was his teacher. Socrates was a great philosopher. And what happened with Socrates, and this is all important because I'm relating this to what's happening today and what we need to do today. What happens with Plato's Apology, he was talking about Socrates' trial. And Socrates, like I said, was a great philosopher, and he was put on trial in a democracy in Greece by his own country in Athens. And what he was put on trial for was he was corrupting. They stated that he was corrupting or poisoning the minds of the youth, and impiety. That's what he was put on trial for: impiety and corrupting the minds of the youth, which he, in their way of thinking, is him corrupting their minds was getting them to think outside the box or think in a different way than what was contemporary at that time in Greece. And the impiety accusation was him not acknowledging or being sacrilegious to their gods or their God theories. So this is something I want you to keep in mind. This is what Socrates went to trial for. And what Socrates did, he gave his apology, which at that time meant his defense of how he was going about doing things and why he was going about doing things. So when we're talking about an apology or a defense of your actions or a defense of your opinions, that's the root of what apology means. And of course, what happened with Socrates was put to death by poisoning for those accusations. Now, there's a difference between having an apology and being sorry. And it's a slight, what happens is we cross those words. We say, well, you need to apologize. And we say, well, I'm sorry. And it's like, well, what are you sorry for? You say, well, I'm sorry for this. But see, this is the difference between having an apology and being sorry. When you're sorry, that's showing remorse also. It's a feeling of remorse for something that's happened, but you're not necessarily owning it. See, I can be sorry that something happened to you, not that I caused it. And this is something that I've been guilty of, because people will say, man, something that happened. I say, well, this is what's happening with me. And they'll say, well, I'm sorry. And I ask them, well, why are you sorry? Did you do it? And this is where I'm crossing those words up, because just because someone is sorry, they could feel remorse, but they're not owning what happened. They could feel sorry that this is happening to you and have nothing to do with it. When you apologize, that means you're taking ownership, or it's a defense of your ownership of why you did what you did. That's the etymology of the word. That's what it originally means. I'm defending, this is why I did what I did. This is my apology. This is what I did. This is why I did what I did. And that's what Socrates gave, was his apology, his defense. So when we're talking about being unapologetic, I mean, when we don't have to defend something, we don't have to defend what we're doing or why we did it, our opinions about something or our actions. We're not having to defend it and say, and a lot of times it means that you don't have to say you're sorry. Why are you feeling remorseful? And not necessarily that you're feeling remorseful, but also it's a point of saying, why do I even have to defend it? And this is what unapologetic means. So what does it mean to be unapologetically Black? That's actually what the show is going to be about. When we're talking to the blueprint, we're talking things in the Black community. And this is how I relate things to the Black community. When I was thinking about or hearing about Socrates' trial and he actually had to drink poison for his actions, for his philosophy, for him thinking outside of contemporary thought that was going on in Greece and Athens. And they prided themselves on having a democracy, a council, and all these type of things like that. But this is used an example of where that democracy goes wrong, because everyone's thinking a certain way. And when you start thinking outside of that box and people are not ready for you to think outside of that box, then this is what happened to one of the great philosophers in history. I'd like to thank Dee for showing up, and Kayla, and Avelina and Barbara, welcome back to the Blueprint. And Isha, welcome back, cuz. Great to see you again. And Cliff, welcome back to the Blueprint. So this is what we're going to talk about. And keep that in mind, your defense, apology, being unapologetic and unapologetically Black. And you think about things that's happened or things that are happening in America. What is America's stance with us on history? See, history, what has history shown us? First of all, if we ask that question, what have history shown us in this country, in America? What has history shown us? I mean, America has fed us a history. And how is that history? This is Black History Month. This is what we accepted. This is something that that was started as a week, I believe by Carter G. Wilson, and now it's Black History Month. And I spoke on this last week, my different thoughts about having a Black History Month. But this is a time for us, many of us, if we look on social media, this is a time when we concentrate on things that has happened to us in history and some of the things that we didn't know about. And why do we not know about some of the things that has happened to us in history? If history is so important, I mean, we pay at universities to have history classes. We're taught history all throughout school. So what has history shown us? The history that we have been shown and taught and gotten from this country, from this education system. What has it shown? For one thing, to me, it's shown that America, it has been unapologetic with its treatment of the Native Americans. It's been unapologetic with its treatment of the slaves, the African slaves that they brought here. So if that's the case, they're not showing any defense of their actions. When we are learning about the things that has happened, we are not learning about the atrocities And to where America is showing remorse, if you're not even acknowledging the full atrocities that's happened to the Native Americans. I learned more about the atrocities that America has committed, or the Europeans that came to this country committed against the Native Americans after school. You know, to me, as a Native American Holocaust. I learned more about the German Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust, than I've learned about the Native American Holocaust that happened in the land that I'm born in, that I'm living in. I learned more about the German Holocaust in school than I learned about the Holocaust of my own people. So if I am not even being taught in this country about the Holocaust that's happened to Black America, how are they being apologetic? How can they even begin to be apologetic about their actions if they won't even acknowledge their actions or speak on it? I'd like to thank Renee for showing up, and Andrea, welcome back to the Blueprint, and Erica, welcome back to the Blueprint. So this is what I want to get into. What has history shown us? What has the history of this country shown us in this teaching of our history, of Black history? For one, they're showing that they have no remorse. If you can't even acknowledge, or you don't even want to speak about it, then how are you even showing regret? We talk about reparations. You know, I remember a lyric from J. Cole. He's talking about it took Obama to tell the Japanese sorry for the dropping the bombs on Hiroshima and during World War II and things like that. He had nothing to do with that. But he apologizes for America. It took Clinton to give reparations, I believe, to the Japanese during World War II. They've received reparations, and that's apologies. You know, that's saying, hey, you know, we did something wrong, and this is how we're going to make up for it. If you're showing some type of remorse, or you want to apologize and you want to say, I'm sorry, then what you do is you try to make amends of your actions. And like I spoke on a previous show about the reparations that was given to Hawaiians when their land was taken, and they were offered some type of reparations. And we talk as Black people in this country about reparations, and there's a resistance going on, and it's hard. It seems like that's a hard road for us. How do we go about getting reparations, and why haven't we gotten reparations, and why is that such a big topic, or why is that so hard for us to come by? I have to thank Mike for showing up and Tiffany for showing up. So part of the reasons is a lot of these, like I was thinking and I was talking about on a previous show, it's like 80% of Americans don't believe that Blacks should be given any kind of reparations for slavery. And I think part of that is the ignorance of a lot of Americans on what has actually happened to us during slavery. There's no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, first of all. So if it's not even an acknowledgement, how are you going to apologize? And then if you're not even going to be apologetic or saying you're sorry, how are you going to approve reparations? And history has shown us a lot of times when we talk about our past, what has happened is this attitude of, well, that was a long time ago. You know, you need to get over it. You need to, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But what is the point of history? I mean, if I was in class and I'm thinking, you know, coming up, having history class and maybe the grades I got in history and how important that was. I mean, I probably got a lot of ass whoopings partly because of history, my grades. I mean, I said before that a lot of times I was the troubled child. You know, my sister was the smart one, and you know, we would get in trouble over our grades. So imagine if I was in history class and they asked me something about American history, and I'm like, well, that was a long time ago. That's really not that important. We need to get over that. What history teacher would accept that answer? But yet we're forced to accept that. They're steady pushing that in our face. That was history, especially when we talk about our history and the wrongdoings of this country. I'm going to read a comment from Tiffany. She says, we haven't gotten, I guess she's saying them, a reparations because we haven't demanded them. Also, we have been brainwashed into foolish pride about accepting them. I'd like to thank Hinch for showing up. Welcome to the Blueprint. And Tiffany also said, Many races have and still are getting generational reparations. I appreciate those comments. Now, I think the reparation thing has been brought up. I think I seen an interview, like I said, about maybe 30 years ago, with Barbara Walters and Farrakhan, when he was talking about reparations and what kind of reparations we were demanding. But that was like outlandish at that time for us to be talking about getting 40 acres and a mule or whatever we felt that we deserved. And with us, the demand hasn't been there because the point is we've been apologetic. Many of us have been trained and educated to be apologetic. And a lot of us don't even think that we deserve reparations, many of us. So if many of us that's been educated in this system and miseducated, I want to say that, miseducated in this system, are not even pushing for reparations. And a lot of times what's happening is we as a people are being apologetic in everything that we do. We don't want to offend anyone. And this is what I want to talk about. Being sorry or being apologetic, and not being sorry and being unapologetic. Showing no remorse, no regret for what it is that you have to say, or how it is that you feel. You know, that it happened a long time ago attitude. You know, what are you going to do today? That's a valid statement, but also that doesn't mean that you forget what has happened to you, because we are constantly learning history. And we learn in history for a reason. Why are we learning about the Jewish Holocaust? Why are we learning about Anne Frank? What is the reason that they're still teaching us that history? And what is the reason that they are miseducating us on our history? Because during this month, if you look on the timelines of many people now, we are learning about tidbits that we never knew. A lot of things that we never knew as a people. A lot of things that we should be taught, or we should have been taught. But there's a purpose to why the perpetrators of the crimes are not teaching about the crimes. I mean, can you imagine Nazi Germany, if they were still in control, trying to teach the Jewish people about the atrocities that they committed against them? You know, since when does that really actually happen? And the thing is, we have to learn about our own history. So we go about learning about our own history. But the thing is, anytime that we do these things, that we step out of the educational guidelines and we start learning things on our own and we present things on our own, there's a backlash. There's a backlash, and it has been a backlash throughout history. If we look at what has happened with Malcolm X or the Nation of Islam, you know, to begin before, I mean, that's where Malcolm X started with the Nation of Islam, you know, that's where he started at. The education of who you are and what has happened to you as a people. If we look at what happened with Garvey, many of those that found out or that sought and learned our history and tried to present it to the masses, what has been the repercussions of doing that? You know, what has been the repercussions? What has happened to the Black Panther Party? They were painted as being something that was totally different than what their purpose was. You know, helping themselves. You know, they took the same thing they did with Malcolm X. They by any means necessary. They took that quote and they ran with that. And this is how they painted Malcolm X as being violent. And if you listen or you learn and you educate yourself on Malcolm X, on anything that he was talking about and being about, it had nothing about going out and committing violence against somebody else. It was more so about defending yourself. And why did you have to defend yourself? Because you had a different ideology. You had to defend yourself in this country because it was not accepted. He was being put on trial like Socrates was. Socrates had to offer an apology, which was a defense on why he was teaching the youth to open their minds and not just accept status quo and contemporary thought. That was egregious to the officials in Athens. These kids are coming up not thinking the way that we that they thought they should be thinking, and not worshiping the Greek gods the way that they thought that they should, showing being sacrilegious, not respecting the authority. And here this is a revolutionary act to those that was in charge. And you're corrupting the mind of the youth. And this is what Garvey was trying to do. This was what W.E.B. Du Bois was trying to do. This is what Elijah Muhammad was trying to do. This is what Malcolm X was trying to do. This is what Stokely Carmichael or Kwame Ture was trying to do. Or any of the brothers and sisters that was in the Black Panther Party. They gained information. They were trying to spread that information to the masses. And then they became villains. Malcolm X became a villain. He was painted as being violent. The brothers and sisters in the Black Panther Party, they was painted as being violent. And if you look at them, a lot of them was like professors and educators. They were brilliant people. This is the repercussions of going against contemporary thought, or what those in the powers that be are trying to impose on the masses. They're controlling people both ways. I'd like to thank Tracy for showing up, and Lynn, and I don't want to butcher your name. My brother, I appreciate you showing up. And I'm gonna read a comment from Kayla. She said, to some reparations aren't necessarily an acceptable apology from the government for over 400 years of oppression and opposition. For most Black people, it is not the money that we seek, but actual equality and appropriations. I appreciate those comments, and that's very true. And this is something that when I had spoke on reparations before. But I tell you this, I'm gonna say this: the money is a beginning. That's a beginning. And that was my contention from my show on reparations, is that's not enough. Money is not enough. It has to be generational, because slavery lasted for what, 290 something years. Then you had the Jim Crow era after that. Then you have the new Jim Crow era that followed that. So it's been generational things. And how many generations are in 290 something years? And you think of generation, or what they define a generation as, is 30 years, every 30 years. So how many times does 30 go into 290, I believe it was 294 years or something like that, of just slavery? When you're just talking about reparations for slavery, then when you start talking about what happened in the Jim Crow era, these are things that we are not even educated on. So many of us are not equipped to speak on the reparations, because we don't even know the extent of everything. We think of slavery, and this is the part of the problem. If we look at that movie Harriet, which I'm not a big fan of that movie Harriet, they watered down the atrocities of slavery. And this is what has happened in our history books. The atrocities have been watered down. So the impact of it has been watered down. A lot of times people just think of it as labor. So much so that we interchange the word slavery here in America with slavery that's happened pre-American history. Where Egyptians enslaved the Nubians, we think, but it's not the same. The atrocities are not the same. So anytime we interchange slavery that we see in biblical writings with the Holocaust that happened here, then it's not the same. They don't equate, because we are not taught that in actuality what has happened here to us and how it has happened to us. I'm gonna read a comment from Teresa. She said, our country's extreme efforts to suppress the truth speaks volumes about how much they realize that the depth of their atrocities committed. I appreciate those comments, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And this is what part of the problem is. This country remains unapologetic, but yet we have to go about being apologetic about when we are trying to teach and speak about those atrocities. Those examples have been shown throughout history. The history on two folds. On their side, they're unapologetic. On our side, we have to be apologetic, because we see what has happened to the leaders that try to speak out. about those atrocities. Anytime we're trying to learn, and then today's, when we're trying to learn or we're trying to teach those things, you know, it's almost like they want you to defend your actions. You know, anytime we speak about, if we say, well, Black Lives Matter, just as a statement, we have to explain that what we mean by that. And that should speak for itself, because anybody could say, if somebody told me, you know what, Asian lives matter, I'd be like, yeah, you're right. They don't have to say, well, you know, where everybody's life, but they don't, it's no need for me to go into all of that. If I say I love myself, and I told you as a person, I bumped to you and I say, I love me. Why do I have to defend me saying that I love me or that I matter? But anytime you put Black with that, then you have to defend it, or people are looking for some kind of an apology in that aspect of defense, an apology. You have to defend what you mean by saying that. That's being apologetic to what you're saying when we say that. I'm going to read another comment from Kayla. She says, sometimes we are our own problem. Often the powers that be are able to continue to suppress our knowledge because of our own people. Our unity enables us to strengthen ourselves, and that then allows us to surmount the suppression of the government. It sounds base, but there's powers in numbers, and we have to gather, unify, and elevate as a whole. They divide us so they can conquer, and we must stop allowing that to prevail. Now, I appreciate those comments, and I wholeheartedly agree on everything you said. Our unity is the key to our success. And on another show, I don't want to go too much into that, but what you just said, well, they got this thing out, or this show out on Netflix about who killed Malcolm X. And what that is causing is a divide in our Black community and a lot of negativity towards the Nation of Islam. But I don't want to go too much into that, but I have my own views about that. And I'm going to go talk about that on another show. But I appreciate those comments. And there is a lot of truth to that. We need to unify. If I said the Occam's razor of a remedy and of Black America, the Occam's razor I don't care if you're talking about any minority in America or any people that's being oppressed. The Occam's razor would be unity, as far as I'm concerned. And if you, what the Occam's razor is you peel back and you say one thing. If you said, okay, what is one thing that you think will cure all of your ailments? I would say unity will cure that in many aspects. Now, what happens is we have different people fighting different things in the Hickman's Dickman of the opposition of Occam's razor, which is that you can attack many problems at once. And this is what's happening with us. We're trying to attack different fronts, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if we want to simplify it, I would say unity. But we have to realize that there are different battles to be fought because we're being attacked on different angles and different sides. And one of it is education. And what happens is by us attacking different fronts, we fight amongst each other about, well, you're doing that. And everyone wants to say, well, what I'm doing is right. And we have to realize there are many fronts. There's many battles to be fought. And we need the unity to fight many of those battles. And if I'm doing one thing, like if you look at Black History Month, it's a lot of things that's going on. These are things that we should be doing every month, but it's a lot of activities happening, events going on that we should be doing anyway. But for some reason, we only concentrated in February, where I know one thing, like my daughter said, she said, I was asking about getting something to eat, and she said, well, let's get it from here, because I think she said that every day she was trying to patronize a Black establishment for one thing or another, spend dollars every day. That was her mission, to spend dollars at a Black. But then I applaud that. But then that's something that we need to start carrying over and not be apologizing for doing that. That's what I'm talking about. We have to do these things and not be apologizing. I like to thank RC for showing up. Welcome to the Blueprint, cuz. And what happens is when I'm fighting one battle, and this is what we could look at history and see this. We could see W.B. Du Bois was fighting, one way, or he believed we should fight one way, and Garvey was believing we should fight another way, or have this back to Africa or Pan-Africanism. And because they had different viewpoints, we're fighting amongst each other. Malcolm X had one ideology or philosophy. Martin Luther King had another. And what we did, we allowed them to say, well, you have to choose one or the other. One had to be good and one had to be bad. One was peace and one was violence, when that wasn't even the case. We allowed them to do that, because if we actually would have sat back and listened to what Malcolm was saying, they painted him as being violence and saying violence was the way. What they considered violence was standing up for your rights, standing your ground. That if someone is trying to stop you from having your freedom, then you had a right to fight back. If someone was wanting to crack you in the skull for sitting there or drinking from a fountain or doing whatever, then you had a right to fight back. Since when is that violence? And what has America shown? When has America said that they should turn the other cheek? When has this government turned the other cheek for anyone that they feel has done anything against their ideology? When has America turned the other cheek? We still fighting wars. It's a generation since 9/11 that's all they've known is America that's been at war. No one's invaded our borders, but we're always at war. So it's a generation that's grown up, that's all they've known is that we as a country has been at war. So what has America done? When has America turned the other cheek? But they expect that from us. And I'm saying by us because they have laws that's in this country that say stand your ground, stand your ground. But anytime we try to stand our ground, we're seen as violence, and we have to apologize about standing our ground or speaking about standing our ground. We sound militant when we talk about standing our ground. And if we look at what has happened in the history of this country towards us, what Assata Shakur, things and brothers in the Black Panther Party that has been gunned down by the police. Brutally beaten, things like that. Those brothers have been treated differently by this government. And also, if we look at in recent history, how people that have what they claim stood their ground, that's provoked incidents. And they call it standing their ground. But you have a right to protest. You have a right to go out and peacefully protest. But when you do that and you're Black, there's consequences that you have to pay for that. Not only with law enforcement, but with everyday civilians. That stand your ground is really not meant for us. If you look at the history of this country, I like to thank Ant for showing up. Ant Witt, what's up, man? Welcome to the Blueprint, man. But this is the issue that we have if we learn from our history. So America has been unapologetic in what it has done to us throughout history. But we constantly have to defend and apologize. We have to tippy-toe around, like we ballerinas. And if you walk too hard or you stomp too hard, then you have to explain your stance or where you're coming from. We have to be apologetic in everything we do and say. When we're talking about, just to say that I love myself, or to teach love with Black people, we teach love in the Black community, to say, well, you know what? I love Blackness. I'm pro-Black. And every time you see anybody say pro-Black, you always got to say, well, pro-Black doesn't mean anti-white. Why do we have to defend what pro-Black means? What does pro mean? And I don't mean it's short for professional. I'm talking about being pro something. If you're pro women's right, you don't have to take a stance with, I'm not against any man. You know, I'm not, they don't have to do that. But when you say I'm pro-black, you always have to follow that with I'm not anti, or pro doesn't mean anti. We have to be apologetic in everything we say and do for loving. We have to compensate. And the thing is, the reason that we have to compensate is because things has been taken away from us in this country. We have to say I'm pro-black because being anti-black has been imprinted on us since we've been here. That love for ourselves has been taken away. So now there has to be a movement to show love for yourself. But when you show love for yourself, you have to be apologetic about doing it and explain or defend your actions about being pro-black. You know, I have a black vehicle, and I put a red, black, and green sticker on my vehicle. I used to have a big red, black, and green bumper sticker on there. When I showed up to work, people was asking me, like, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean? I'm like, that's Pan-Africanism. That's red, black, and green. So when they see me with the red, black, and green flag, or they see me with the blueprint, or they see me with the, you know, brothers at the Mexico Olympics, 68 Olympics, I believe. Tommy Smith and John Carlos, when they see that and they see the black fist raised, well, what does that mean? So what does that mean? What do you mean? What does it mean? It speaks for itself. If you learn about it, and if history is teaching correctly, you already know what it means. But then I have to, you know, or they want me to be apologetic to defend. And that's what I mean by apologetic. Remember what the etymology of the word. Apologia means to defend your opinions, to defend your conduct. So I'm constantly asked to defend my conduct. And to bring that even further on the blueprint, I meant to say something about this a couple of weeks ago when it happened, but I had a show and someone, you know, I advertised the show about an hour or so ahead of time, and Facebook contacted a person and they screenshotted and sent it to me. And they asked them, like, so what do you think? Is this show like offensive? Or you know, normally when something is offensive to somebody on social media, they report you. Facebook, I haven't seen where they went and asked people, do you want to report this guy? And this was right after my show was banned, and they didn't give me a reason why. I don't talk about hurting anybody. I don't talk about, I'm not anti, if you think being pro-black is anti anybody else, then that's so be it. Only people that should be offended by anything I say on here is those that look for, they want things to be status quo in the black community. I'm talking about empowerment. I'm talking about encouraging people to have conversations. I'm talking about building up our communities. And how can that be offensive to anybody? Me being pro is not anti anybody else, but I don't have to explain that to anybody else. And this is what I'm talking about, being unapologetic. But the reason that we have to compensate, we have to make up for what has been taken away. There's so much hate that's going on amongst ourselves. So what we have to do is turn around and show love. We have to show black love. And when I say black love, that seems to be offensive to other people. Why does black love or black unity, why is that offensive to the masses? If I'm talking about teaching our youth their history, and our history consists of atrocities that others have committed, they should have been learning those atrocities from you since you're in charge of the education system. But since it's not, then I have to make up for that void. And many of us that's out here teaching our true history shouldn't be offensive to anybody unless they're propagating false history. The truth is only offensive to falsehood. So if it's anything that I'm putting out, now I have friends, you know, people I know that say, well, man, you know, I didn't even know this happened. And the reason you don't know it's happening is because, for one, if you're not a black person, you don't know that it's happening. You're not looking at you're not looking at our plight. You're not, you know, This has happened, you know, all these protests and everything that's been happening for the last, I say 5 or 6 years, just the last 5 or 6 years. If you're unaware of the brutality committed through law enforcement or these incidents here and there, because you're not trying to look at it. You're going around with your eyes closed to our plight. And I don't care whether you do that or not. But to me, that's part of the problem in this country, because there's a lot of people that have a lot to say about things that they don't know anything about. So my problem is when I go places or I go around people that don't look like me and they tell me, well, what they need to do, they need to stop doing this. And how you going to give opinions about things that you don't even know anything about? And when I start to engage them with conversation about what's happening, or they find out something, they like look it up and say, man, I wasn't even aware. And I'm like, yeah, I realized that when you open your mouth the first time. But then people that speak about this and teach about this and post about this, they're saying as being some of the words that they use are you revolutionary. Well, that's a good thing to me. Being revolutionary is a good thing. That means you're going against contemporary thought, or you're going against status quo. You're trying to turn things around. And if we are in a bad condition, then that's a good thing for me to be trying to turn things around, or for somebody else to be trying to turn things around. And if contemporary thought is trying to keep us in a submissive role, like I was speaking on that meek inheritance, you know, if you're trying to keep us meek, and I'm saying we don't need to be meek. You know, an eye for an eye should only be offensive to those that's trying to take away your eye. You know, that's how I see it. Because any other time, that's justice. You know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If you're not trying to knock out my teeth, then you ain't got nothing to worry about. So when I say a tooth for a tooth, then you must be the one, and that's offending you. You must be the one trying to knock out people's teeth. That's the only reason that would be offensive to you. I appreciate Sabrina for showing up, and RC said, hell, they don't even want us to protest. Right. You know, everything that we do is like an aggravation. But to take that, everything that we have to compensate for, they're not teaching us in history. So we have to go out and teach our own history. But then they want us to be apologetic with that. You know, pride, having Black pride. If you're trying to instill pride, then it's a problem with that among many people in America. You know, here I am, I'm concentrating on us in our neighborhood, in our communities. Why is that an issue with you if you're not living in our communities? You sit there and watch incidents on the news or violence in the news, and then shake your head and say this is what's happening, and have an opinion about what's happening in the Black community that you don't live in. So when we try to correct issues in our community, which starts with pride and education, then that's a problem. You know, that's where the problem comes in. Then you want me to apologize, or you want us to be apologetic. You want us to tiptoe around issues. Because if I'm talking about true history and you have nothing to worry about, then that conversation wouldn't even exist. But if me telling the truth is going to reveal the things that you did, or the things that America has done, then America has things to worry about. You know, and it's something that I'm going to bring up, something like Caleb was saying, many of the problems are things that we bring upon ourselves because of the unity. A lot of things that we like to say, this is something that's a popular thing. Black people like crabs in a barrel. This is something that crabs in a bucket, crabs in a barrel. You know, we pulling each other down. This is the things that we hear a lot in the Black community. If you look at it from the stance of that crab, for one thing, why are they in a bucket? Why are they in a barrel? That's something that's not natural to crabs. That bucket is a man-made thing. They are put in a situation that they are not even used to. So we're attacking them for how they reacted to a situation that they're not even naturally supposed to be in. And when you have crabs in a bucket, this is how I look at Black America, brown America. We talk about crabs being in a bucket. See, in a crab's natural state, they're in the ocean, right? They can move around freely. They got room to move around. You put them in a bucket, they're trying to get up out of that bucket. They're not thinking about or having a history about, well, this is what we should do or how we should act. They're in a panic state. And if we look at Black America, When it's like when you we're rubbing shoulders. We're being put in this bucket, these tenement buildings, these projects. Somebody stand right next to you, right above you, right below you. We're in a bucket. When you're in an elevator and there's too many people and it's crowded, people start to aggravate you. You get agitated. I know that's how I am with big crowds. When it's like too many people, I don't like to, I get agitated and aggravated. People bumping into me. I don't have my room, my space. I'm like, give me my space. But this is the what we have been put in this country. Our ghettos are like buckets, and we are crabs trying to get out of those ghettos. That's not natural for us to be in. That's not what the rest of America is in. If you go to the other side of town, they have these big plots of land, big houses with big yards, big gated communities. They could go freely anywhere they want. And when they get tired of being around their environment, they could just take off and think, I'm going to take this trip. When you're in the ghetto, when you're in the struggle, you're not afforded that luxury. So you're seeing the same people, overcrowded schools, overcrowded neighborhoods, So we get agitated easily with each other. Something that you see all the time. You get agitated and you don't, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't value. You see each other as a nuisance, and things that you take for granted. If you see it every day, the same people that you're growing up with is out there in the neighborhood, then you're at the same school and you don't have any elbow room, no space, any space. We like crabs in a bucket. You're not used to being overcrowded like that. So you're agitated. When you're agitated, you're quick to, strike out. And that's how we are with each other. We're quick to exact retribution against each other. We don't see the value in each other. So many times we have to instill value in each other, despite the conditions that we have been put in. This is not conditions that we strive for. These are not things that we wanted. I mean, the ghetto, the projects, it's a project. This is what the government has done. If we look at Jim Crow, we look at things that's happened from the time after the 1920s when they started destroying our communities. We were forced to be segregated. But when we built something that was, Black Wall Street and things like that, that was destroyed. And then we were forced to be over the railroad tracks in this town or over the railroad tracks in that town or city. Crowded, low income. Because now we're feeding off the government. This is the government wanted us to be dependent. The government wants us to be meek. So anytime you're standing up and you're not meek, and remember, meek is being easily imposed upon. And anytime I see a lot of conditions that we are in or how we react, a lot of times I say, well, that's made in America. This is how America, when you have people that's undereducated, undercompensated, these conditions that fester, then that same place is putting drugs in your community. This is the history that I'm talking about. When we learn these things in history and we speak about the things in history, when we talk about the Iran-Contra things and the Reagan administration and them pumping crack into our neighborhoods, when we speak about those things, then they want us to apologize, to defend our speaking and our teachings. This is what I mean by being apologetic. They want us to defend what we speak about. And even on this show, it's people that I ask to come on or say they want to come on and then they change their mind. They're like, well, I have to, I got a new job and this, and I'm like, well, what they have to do with speaking about building a village in the Black community? People already take this apologetic stance. Well, I don't want to offend. I got this type of job, or I'm doing this, and I don't want to. And I'm trying to tell them, man, it has nothing to do with offending anybody. No one should be offended about us talking about building up us. but for some reason they are. But we have to learn to be unapologetic. And how do you learn to be unapologetic? Is to empower yourself. You have to empower yourself to where no one has power over you. Like Stokely Carmichael said, if someone wants to hang me, that's their problem. But if they have the power to hang me, then that's my problem. So what we have to do is take away that power to where people, when they don't want us to speak about Black love, Black pride, Black education, Black history, true Black history, then we have to take away their power on what they can do to us. You know, this is what I'm talking about, it being unapologetic, unapologetically Black. It doesn't mean that you want to offend people. It's that you don't care if people are offended, especially if you're doing and speaking what's right and speaking the truth. If you're speaking the truth, why do you care about who's offended by the truth? Except for those that want you to be living a lie. That's what being unapologetically Black is about. When we learning that when we can go about wearing our hair naturally the way our hair is meant to be, if that's what we choose to be, and it shouldn't be offensive to anybody else. I remember my mom telling us back when they was doing the Afro thing in the early 70s, late 60s and things like that, you know, having an Afro was seen as being rebellious. You know, that was seen as being rebellious. And they told her, or they told them at work, nobody need to wear, you know, don't come to work in no Afro. So all of them, all the Black people showed up with Afros. But why would they have to do that? Why would somebody be telling them that? What difference does it make if your hair is straight, curly, dreadlocks? You know, long as it's well kept or whatever. But those are things that we have to apologize. And many of us, like Kayla was saying, we carry that on ourselves. You know, I don't like that kinky look. You know, I don't, you know, so-and-so needs to comb their hair. You know, things like that, because we've been imprinted upon it. That's what this country has been doing, imprinting. And what imprinting is, that's phase sensitive teaching. You know, that's what imprinting is. Like when the things you learn from something that you're dependent upon. That's phase sensitive learning. And everything, that's why I say everything that we do and we have been doing has been taught in this country to us. And when we start breaking out of that norm, then they want us to apologize. But we have to learn that we don't have to apologize. I don't even have to give you an explanation about my love for myself or my love for my brothers and sisters, or wanting to empower myself, unless you want to stay in power and keep me powerless, then you'll be offended by me wanting my own independence and power. I'm gonna read a comment from Teresa. She said, I see the undereducation of whites as a purposeful recent activity used to promote an agenda that allows them to be fed wrong information. And this is true. This is the whole, I think that miseducation of them has been going on for a long time also. It's a lot of ignorance that's being fed. You know, the whole thing, like the welfare system, when we look at that, you know, it's this thing in America where they thinking that the blacks are just on welfare, the browns are just on welfare. And the main perpetrators of those that's on welfare is the white people. But this is not something that has been taught. This is when they want to miseducate you. They want to control you. And this is why it is important for us to educate ourselves and teach each other. And we have to do it to the point that we're not apologizing for doing it. I don't have to defend me. If I'm giving bad information, then I understand. But I'm seen as being rebellious or revolutionary for wanting to educate and spread the truth, or to spread joy and pride in the Black community, to undo the things that have been done. Empowerment. And this is what we must do. We must empower. I had a question from someone. They asked about satisfaction. It was something probably on one of these shows. And somebody asked me, they said something that was posed probably about relationship things. And they asked me, they was like, so do you seek satisfaction? Do you do things that's going to satisfy you, or do you seek to satisfy others? And my answer is actually it's one and the same. I don't do things for myself. That's what this country is about. Everyone for themselves. I seek satisfaction in the happiness of others, even to the point that they don't even if they don't realize the things that we're doing is not superficial. It's not something that's going to be a quick satisfaction for themselves. But we have to instill things that's going to help them in the long run. Same thing we do with kids. When they want that candy and that sweets and all these things like that, that's going to get them that satisfaction at that moment. And we let them know, well, no, you can't have that. You need to get this fruit. You need to, because we're looking at not satisfying them for the moment, appeasing them for the moment, your taste buds for the moment. I'm looking at the long run. This has to be how we go about thinking. You know, the things that we do as far as reading, no, you need to go read a book. I know you want to play this game. You need to do this, or you need to learn this. And at this time, they may not understand a lot of things that that our people, we want quick satisfaction and not long-term satisfaction. This is something that we need to change. I remember an incident with my kids here. My daughter was in high school. My son, I think he was probably in college at the time. I came home from work. There was a big fight outside. Now, the thing is, when my kids was growing up, I put them in martial arts, Muay Thai, and things like that. My daughter, 5 years old. My son, you know, he was a Muay Thai prodigy at that time. Had won state, you know, things like that in tournaments and things like that. Taught him how to box, taught him how to fight. And they probably didn't know or didn't understand at the time, because you 5 year old, you 6 year old, things like that, you're not understanding. But there was a purpose in what that was about. Now, going back to the fight, I came home from work one time and this crowd full of people all over the street. And I'm like, damn, what the hell is happening? It's a house party, somebody having a block party. But what it was is everyone from a ball game came to the house to see a fight that people brought to my house for my daughter. She was getting into it with some girl, came to our house. I wasn't at home. She got out the car. All hell broke out right there. I'm driving home. I'm trying to make it through all these people in the street, and I see they out tangled up, her and the girl. My daughter handling it, and I'm trying to stop her. I don't know what it's about, but I'm just trying to stop her. Then my son's girlfriend, like, Kylie over there fighting too. And I'm turning around like, what the hell is happening? But when people are bringing things to your house like that, and I let my daughter go, and I go try to break up the fight with my son, and it's already over with. He's already coming back over here to me, and then I'm getting my daughter off this girl. But all that stuff was pre-prepared. Somebody brought something to our house, and they was prepared for that before it even happened. They was prepared years before that even happened. This is how we have to conduct ourselves, not just talking about physically, I'm talking mentally. We have to prepare our kids for the fight that's going to be down the road for them, because we as a people are going to be continue to fight. We have a fight that's going to be happening for decades. We have to prepare them. Now, when they were going through all that stuff and hadn't to go to practice, they didn't realize why. But I didn't want a situation to where I have to be pulling somebody off for my daughter. I didn't want a situation where I have to be pulling somebody off for my son. If that's the case, then that person earned that. We have to get to a point that we are training our kids reading, history, philosophy, reasoning, logic, understanding what's happening. And the reason I'm saying philosophy and logic, because if things are changing, the way they're attacking you are going to be different than the ways they attacked us a long time ago. You have to be preparation. And you can't apologize for preparing for a storm. The same storm has been over our heads. It hasn't been any sunshine. And those moments of sunshine that we create for ourselves are very unimportant at that time, because we have to be looking at the big picture. We have to be unapologetic at preparing our youth for the big picture. This is Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. I appreciate everyone's comments and contribution. And Didi said, I remember that night you came home from work. Yeah, that was, I kind of chuckled at that, but I thought about that. And that was preparation that was put in motions years before that, a decade before that. You know, we have to prepare in every aspect of everything that they have to go through. We have to empower ourselves and empower our youth. And a lot of times we haven't been empowered from the generation before us because they wasn't educated on the things that were happening. They were miseducated. And if we have that information, then we have to give that information. Everything that we are lacking to get what we need to get done, we need to provide. We need to compensate for the voice that's there, that's been created purposely. That's Kevin Lewis on the Blueprint. I appreciate everyone's contribution, and hopefully I have a better show for y'all next week.